I think we are conditioned to believe that we are not as capable, right? In reality, we are. We're more than capable, right? But whatever you are, if you don't believe it, you're limited by what your own self-limiting beliefs are.
He is managing director of ELGi Equipments Limited. He has transformed that company in a very tough environment, keeping global aim to be amongst the top global companies. I was looking at the top 10 and he's well amongst top 10.
We can't build a company on the back of cheap Indians. We need to build a company where Indians are expensive, right? Not only does it make you global and unshackles you from the tyranny of cheapness, it also gives you, it's the right thing to do.
The point which you mentioned of transition from low value products, low quality image to high quality, Japan is a classical example. So Japanese products were considered cheap, and within 2 decades they were probably the preferred products. And as you rightly said, they offered value proposition to the developed world at a price they couldn't match. So they worked on efficiency and effectiveness both.
I keep giving this, common example of a plastic bottle. A plastic bottle costs 2 rupees and it's so cheap. So people use it and throw it away and abuse the environment. If that bottle was glass and expensive, they will find ways to reuse it and use it judiciously. It's the same thing with people cost. They're cheap, they are overused and abused. They're expensive, they're used very carefully. I always say, when you walk into the customer's office, talk about the value that you're giving. And when you're leaving the customer's office, just before you close the door, you say, "Sir, by the way, we can also give you a good price." Rather than go there and have the entire conversation based on price, right? Because when you sell a product on price, you're making your people cheap at the back end, right?
What would be your advice to the young entrepreneurs who come into business as to what should they really look for and do to bring about a change in our country?
Do not make a Me Too product, because a Me Too product gets sold on price. And when you sell something on price, you are reducing your own self-worth, right?
Namaskar, Jairam.
Namaskar.
Please call me Janak, and I'll call you Jay as you'll like to call yourself.
Yes, Janak.
And it's an informal conversation. This is the 10th episode of the podcast we are doing. The intent is to record the history of quality renaissance in India since 1980s, the early stages of liberalization which started. The idea is I've been under pressure to record this because I've been involved since then. So this is my way of contributing towards recording the history. And with first 9 podcasts were with people who were involved in this in the 1980s or even earlier, pre-liberalization period, if we call it 1991 as a defining period. So you're the first one who started working in post-liberalization period, though you're already maybe 30 years old, so you experienced the past. So I think we're getting into that phase now.
Yeah.
And I deeply appreciate your time and commitment to share your experience. And the idea is how people can learn. Recorded history could be useful to those who want to do something in future, how it has evolved, how it's likely to change. That's the intent. Thank you very much for
It's an absolute pleasure to be with you, Janak. First of all, I want to thank you for what you're doing and what you've done so far. Your commitment to quality and transformation of the country. It's been selfless, and I thank you on behalf of everyone for what you're doing. So, and it's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you. Now, let me introduce Dr. Jairam. He is managing director of ELGi Equipments Limited. He has transformed that company in a very tough environment, keeping global aim to be amongst the top global companies, reached pretty close to that. I was looking at the top 10, and he's well amongst top 10. And it depends how you define global. And maybe with some definitions, he may be even top 3. So, without any further ado, may I request you to share your lifetime experiences starting from the early ages and then moving on to education and how in whatever you did after your education and
Sure.
then in industry.
Sure.
Follow the flow as you like. In between, I will raise certain questions and queries for clarification. Will that be okay?
Absolutely. Perfect.
Fair enough. All yours.
Yeah, so I was born in Coimbatore. Most of my life spent in Coimbatore, except for about 8 years when I was in the US. Business family, started by my grandfather, who was a bus driver. Then he built a fleet of buses. It was a bit of a maverick, and for me, he's been a role model because he started airline companies. He did production of movies. He did mining. He started hotels. So he was a fearless entrepreneur. He just went where he thought there were opportunities, always willing to lose everything to build the next. So that's the kind of environment in which I grew up. Then my father and his brothers came into the business. It was the time of, the license Raj. Everything was frugal. Capital was limited. You had to be very innovative in a very different sort of a way. But, for example, my father and his brothers built the mother machines to build the final products. I mean, that's the kind of frugality that was there. So that was an influencing factor. The other thing is Coimbatore as a society was also a very giving society. Giving was a very big part of almost everyone in that society, irrespective of what caste or community you belong to. Everybody gave disproportionately. So if you look at colleges, hospitals, places of learning, social support organizations, they're all run on charity that has been built by companies that have contributed to this. So this is the kind of environment that I grew up in. I was not a good student. I was more of an athlete. I wanted to be in athletics, but that was not the favored kind of a profession at that time. Went on to do my MBA in the US, and I bit the bug of wanting to be a teacher. So I went on to do my PhD, and I was fortunate enough to do my PhD under Professor C.K. Prahalad. Right? So he was in my committee, and he was my professor, and we spent extremely energizing conversations with him. Those influenced me as well, because for him, it was about building global companies and no excuses, right? Came back, and that was the time liberalization was happening. Typical of most companies at that time, we had grown horizontal, in multiple businesses, because that's the only way you could grow in the licensing system, So you reached your capacity, you got a license for another product, and so on. But the dismantling of all those controls was making everyone naked and vulnerable, right? We were in 8 different businesses, and it was not sustainable, because the best in the world were going to come into India, and our technology was archaic, our quality standards were poor. So we had to transform, and we couldn't transform all 8 of them. So we shut down or sold quite a few extremely profitable businesses. I mean, that was a tough call to make at that time. And I'm glad in retrospect we did that because I don't think we'd have been relevant if we'd stayed down that path. So we picked compressors and automotive equipment. That was our parent business. And that was more a India-centric national business. And we said, let's look at building a global business out of compressors. And that was not, to be honest, a very conscious choice. We had to invest in technology, manufacturing, people to stay alive even in India for the compressor business, right? But the investment required was not justified by the size of the Indian market. So, by choice, we had to look at global opportunities. And India was only 3% of the world market. So, clearly, both these put together, that's where we had to go. So, it was a huge transformation exercise. And I think the biggest transformation for us was the culture in the company and the shifting mindset of Indians that this is possible, right? So I think we are conditioned, I think we still are conditioned to believe that we are not as capable, right? In reality, we are. We're more than capable, right? But whatever you are, if you don't believe it, you're limited by what your own self-limiting beliefs are. And I think transforming the belief sets of people as part of that cultural transformation was the biggest challenge. And it still continues. It's not over. We still believe we are inferior. You know, there are still I would say, the hangover from the colonial dynasties of the past. We still believe that we're not as good, right? So that's really the transformation. So when we started this journey, we took the top 100 companies in compressors, and we were not even in that list, right? Wind forward 30 years later, we are number 6 in the world, and our aspiration is to be in the top 3. And I really don't see why we can't get there, right? Some of the foundational building blocks at a more architectural level, besides the culture, was the technology piece. You know, as a post-independence and the licensing system, we were relying on collaboration, technical collaborations with European, American, and subsequently Japanese companies to bring the technology into our country and to other respective companies. Now, what you got in a licensing system was know-how. You got a set of drawings, got a set of specifications, and they tell you how the products are put together. Now, know-how is good for making profits, but it makes you a slave to the technology because you don't have the ability to build the next. And to build the next, you need know why, not just how things are put together, but why are they put together the way they are, right? That gives you the ability to build the next. And that's more at a level of science. This is more at a level of engineering, right? So we had to build that, right? And it's a long process. It took us, we're still learning, but I believe we are good now in know why of our domain. We can teach companies how to build the next. And we're already delivering those kinds of new technologies to customers now. So that was one big foundation. The other huge foundation was quality. Outside of India, we still are relatively unknown brands, and with a Made in India label, right? If you are a European or an American company with an American brand or European brand, and your product fails, you'll be forgiven. You're an Indian company fighting hard in markets in Europe and America. You cannot fail. You will not be forgiven. You will not get the next opportunity. So quality had to be architected at a level that was where you say, as good is not good enough, right? It had to be far, far better. Failure was not an option, right? And that's a long journey, and it's still continuing on, right? So that was the second pillar. The third pillar was we believed that a true global company is country agnostic, meaning it can set up itself anywhere in the world and still be profitable, which basically meant, which says, we can't build a company on the back of cheap Indians. We need to build a company where Indians are expensive, right? Not only does it make you global and unshackles you from the tyranny of cheapness, yeah, it also gives you, it's the right thing to do. It's equitable, right? It is not like a disproportionate distribution of wealth, right? So we felt that is very, very important. So that was the third pillar, and we're continuing down that path, right? I can't put a value on that. How does that contributed to quality? How does that contributed to our building of technology, It's huge. I mean, it's almost priceless what we do. Yeah. So that took us on a journey, and we said, okay, we went through multiple strategies. One was build the foundational core and sell the core to everyone all over the world, and they will make the full compressor. That didn't work. Then we said, let's do ELGi inside, where we go and buy small companies all over the world, keep the brand outside, put ELGi inside. It's like the Intel strategy, Intel inside. And that didn't work either. So finally, we landed on saying, we're going to build this company on the brand ELGi globally, right? And that's what we did. And geographically, we experimented going into different markets. China was one. We were there for almost 10 years. And we realized that while Europe and America present a challenge in perception, China was a real challenge because their belief of their ability and willingness to recognize and pay for an Indian brand was very low. Whereas in Europe and America, they're very objective. They don't have any biases towards brand. They're very mercenary about deliver this and I'm willing to consider. So we made a pivot and said we will go after these markets which in our mind were very challenging. But in reality, we see after our experience, it's a lot easier in these markets than in actually Asian markets for an Indian brand, right? So that's really been our journey, and that's where I am right now and the whole team. Yeah.
That's great to hear about your journey. I don't know many companies in India who have that kind of a vision which you have evolved over a period of time. And as you rightly said, you're starting your generation from grandfather, how it came about, that itself shows the commitment to the nation, building and then learning the lessons through liberalization. And I think that's remarkable.
Thank you.
So can you explain a little more detail as to how the concept of quality evolved with this change?
I think we started like any other company, looked at customer-facing defects. And the starting point is resolve the defects. That was the whole quality management system was about control and to ensure that the defects don't get passed on to the customer. Resolution of complaints is we've already created a bad experience. The customers already had a problem. So we had to go to the next level of saying, how do you get to assurance, right? Where there is absolutely no defect, right? And I think that transformation was across the organization. It is not just, you had to deploy quality in just about every nook and corner of the organization. And that was a big transformation for the company, right from procurement, design, manufacturing, of course, and assembly, but also in sales. How do you sell the right compressor so that the customer doesn't have defects? This was a much larger transformation. And that transformation journey still continues, because for me, quality has absolutely no end horizon. It keeps on shifting. You can keep pushing the envelope further and further and further. And I think that's a fabulous part of the whole concept of quality. And that's really where we are. So it started with this, simple quality control, and then the whole learning journey of taking it to a very high standard.
So I think it also had something to do with your vision to be selling to the developed world,
Yeah.
who are more discerning in terms of their requirement for quality. And as you rightly said, you attempted in China. Indian market was not so big.
Mm-hmm.
And so most companies in India, as I see, they prefer to go to export markets only in Africa and Southeast Asia, lower end. Very few of them attempt to go to the developed world. Even today, in spite of Manufacturing Competitiveness Council working for almost 10 years, business leaders still feel that it's easy to make money in India. It's difficult to sell in foreign countries in terms of quality of our products. And obviously they get at a discount because the buyer doesn't have a strong image of India.
Sure.
So we export only when we don't make enough money in India. That syndrome still persists with many companies. And those who export basically export to these countries where the expectation quality is not very high.
Mm-hmm. I would say, by and large, I agree with you, but there are increasing instances of exceptions to that. There are a lot of companies, which for me is very endearing to see, taking their products and visibly making their presence felt in markets like Europe and the US, right? So I'm hoping that's a trajectory that everyone looks at and then starts emulating it. And I think the fundamental driver for that is the size of the opportunity. Africa, yes, it may be easy to do, or Middle East or Southeast Asia, wherever it is, maybe in your mind it's easier to do business. But the real size of the opportunity exists. We need to go where the market is rather than where it is convenient for us to do business. You have Mahindra's tractors business in the US. It was fascinating and very endearing to see a Mahindra tractor tilling the land in the middle of nowhere in the US, and you have Balakrishna tires. They are sponsoring some of the, the classical big, monster truck shows. So it's great to see companies who have got that aspiration and that vision of actually going and delivering it, right? So I'm hoping that's just the starting, and I think everybody starts aspiring for that.
I agree. Balakrishna Tire is a classical example. They export all over the world.
Absolutely.
And Mahindra Tractors, fortunately, we were involved in their journey when they wanted to be number one in the world.
Yeah.
And the Deming journey, we were involved in late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
And they got there.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were absolutely right. It's wonderful to see the Mahindra Tractors, not only in USA, but in Australia and other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Well, there are very few companies, and let's hope
Sure.
there are many more willing to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Because again, the challenge really is that, right, if India has to grow in terms of per capita income, the growth rate, if we serve only Indian market, can only be 7%, 8%. But the need is maybe 10, 12% growth rate, like China is doing today. Japan did, Korea did, Taiwan did.
Yeah.
And they got independence at about the same time as we did.
Absolutely.
So unless we sell to the European market, to the developed world, because Africa is a $3 trillion economy. Europe and USA, the ones who can afford to buy. So unless we sell there in those countries, how will we grow at a much faster rate?
That is true. Absolutely. I mean, that's really where the opportunity is. But also taking off from the point that you're making in terms of developing our nation, we can't keep Indians cheap. They have to be expensive. So the way to make that happen is to sell value to the customer, not sell price to the customer. Of course, Indian product, till such time India reaches that pinnacle of, of reputation, there will be a discount. That's a given. So there's really no point talking about it. I always say, when you walk into the customer's office, talk about the value that you're giving. And when you're leaving the customer's office, just before you close the door, you say, "Sir, by the way, we can also give you a good price." Rather than go there and have the entire conversation based on price, right? Because when you sell a product on price, you're making your people cheap at the background, right? You need to build technology which adds value. You sell that value. You build a product which has got absolute quality, where customer will buy with eyes closed and say, I trust you. And if you're Indian, till such time India reaches that reputation, it's okay. You give it at a discount to get in. But the discount should not be the lead. The value should be the lead. And to do that, you need to build technology. You can't create value without really putting substance into your product. And we have the capability. We have the capability to build it, right? But it's a commitment and a long journey, right? So for me, quality is not just the quality of the product, but it's the quality of the value you're presenting to the customer, right? And the value that you bring to your organization, to the people in your organization, and consequently to the people of the country, right? If we keep them cheap, then I don't think we are serving it very well.
I think this aspect of bringing value to the people who work with us is totally new in India today. Thank you for bringing this thinking up, because by and large, most companies still prefer to work, how do I cut cost? And the first thing is labor cost by contract labor, this, that, and the other. It's still very prevalent. But the point which you mentioned of transition from low-value products, low quality image, to high quality, Japan is a classical example. Absolutely. Japanese products were considered cheap, and within 2 decades, they were probably the preferred products. And as you rightly said, they offered value proposition to the developed world at a price they couldn't match. So they worked on efficiency and effectiveness both.
Sure.
And that's how they developed the whole system of management which is today adopted by the rest of the world as well. So if they were able to do it, why are we still struggling to make that transition?
I think it's a mindset issue that is based on a very short uh, cycle of profitability or the way you run the business. Fundamentally, Janak, we all go to work to improve our standard of living. And one aspect of standard of living is what we earn. But if we architect a company strategy based on being cheap, then we are shooting ourselves in our own foot, right? Now, as a CEO or the owner of the company, if I say, I want to be expensive, I want the rest to be cheap, and that's not fair, right? There is no equity in the system. No company in the world, absolutely, you can take any company. There's absolutely no global company that has this level of inequity. Equity has to be built in for the fundamental reason, the capability of the organization is the people. Now, if you don't have equity, you're not going to get the best people to come in. So it's not rocket science, right? But the question really is, what's the time horizon you're looking at for building the organization? If it's too short, then you're looking for instant nirvana. But if you take a longer view and say, how can I build it out where my value, my wealth will be 100 times bigger? At the same time, the people working in the organization, the inequity is a fraction, right, of what it is today. Now, you take a longer term view, it's possible to build it, right? I don't see that as a difficult thing, but it requires that commitment to make that happen, right? And I keep giving this, common example of a plastic bottle. A plastic bottle costs 2 rupees, and it's so cheap. So people use it and throw it away and abuse the environment. If that bottle was glass and expensive, they will find ways to reuse it and use it judiciously. It's the same thing with people cost. They're cheap, they are overused and abused. They're expensive, they're used very carefully, right? So I think it's all how you frame the whole problem. Yeah.
Well, the challenge really is that we continue to live in an environment in India, the valuation of the company in terms of market cap
Absolutely.
and the remuneration of the top leadership on the basis of the quarterly results or annual results.
Yeah.
How do you bring this change in thinking? That's a huge challenge.
It is. It is. The inequity on average in India in the corporate world between the lowest and the highest is obnoxiously high. I don't think it is right. But it cannot be legislated. That doesn't make sense. You can't bring in laws because then it becomes an imposition. It has to be a self-realization. It has to come from within. And I'm hoping that if enough companies practice it and they're able to demonstrate value, it'll have a ripple effect and a replication of it. That's a hope. But then that's not the point. The point is you do what's right, and I think in our company, we are down that path. We're down that journey where we are saying equity is very important. The lowest to the highest will not have a multiple of more than 32. The US is 365. India is 350. Japan is 90. Some of the Scandinavian countries are even lower. We set it at 32 because we feel 6 levels are enough in our organization, and we are doubling at each level, and that comes to 32. Now, people tend to say, oh, but it's easy for you to say. You're part owner in the company, you have shares, you get dividend, so you get the dividend income, so you can work for a lower salary, right? True. That's not, it's not untrue. But then if we get a professional CEO and they do have an aspiration, which is very legitimate, fine. My only request to the professional CEO is raise the bottom. Every time you raise the bottom, you get a multiple of 32. Nothing wrong with that, right?
True.
So the idea is you carry the entire organization. In your own personal aspiration, you carry the organization. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
I think it's really a noble aspiration what you've taken and taken a lead in this direction. Let's hope more and more people follow that lead.
I'm sure they will, because it's the most normal thing to do, and I believe it will happen. Yeah.
Somehow I sense over the last 60 years I've been in this business, working in manufacturing and then in consulting. I sense the industry is really going in the opposite direction. It's accentuating the differentiation or inequality rather than diminishing it.
That's the way it seems, Janak, but I'm hoping that at some point there will be a pivot where people realize it. See, this has to come from self-realization rather than any administrative fiat. And I think it will happen. And I think I have faith that in India, at a fundamental level, there's a great level of goodness. And I think it will happen. But, sometimes the journey looks like it's off track. Maybe it'll turn around and get back in. Yeah.
Let's hope so. And I think I have a greater hope in the next generation of entrepreneurs and professionals.
Yeah.
It's no point blaming the entrepreneurs only. Typically, when we talk to in any company, for any change of this nature, it starts from the top. Obviously, it starts from the top.
Sure.
And top in a family-run company is easier to define. In a professional organization, it's difficult to define because tops keep changing so frequently. Sure. So if this is to happen from the top, the logic is that as we as professionals who are not owning the business, at whatever point in pyramid we are, we still have some people reporting to us. And no top businessman tells us not to deliver good quality and high productivity. Yeah. So we as professionals must also take ownership of whatever is within our control to influence the change. Sure. This reminds me, when Dr. Kano, who I consider as my mentor, he's been saying for a long time, ever since he's come to India in early 2000s, consulting companies. He says, when I ask, what is the key problem facing your company or department, everybody points fingers at others. Hardly anyone talks about the problem he is facing within his control. Mm-hmm. And that mindset is still not changing. Actually, it's getting more and more accentuated. Mm-hmm. That's my experience. And I sense the next generation of people will probably have better probability of change happening. Sure. Because they are not yet rooted in the old system.
Yeah. I'm sure the new generation is coming in with a completely different perspective in terms of what's right and wrong. And I'm hoping, yeah.
Yeah, typically at the same time, what you find is for the same size of an organization, you have in India many more engineers and managers as compared to a similar organization in Europe or USA.
Sure.
And we have more managers, so the same earning is spread over 4 people instead of 1 person, which typically would have happened. Sure. So improving efficiency is a very important method of ensuring that we have the earnings are shared amongst the people who are needed. And that's if it grows, then you create jobs for the other three who are not in, probably lose in this organization, work somewhere else.
Yeah, there's a bit of a conundrum there, when you build or architect an organization based on people being expensive. The default setting is to work with less people. And that sometimes runs contrary to the interest of the nation, which has got a very large population. And therefore, people sometimes ask me, are you doing something which is right for the nation? So my response to that is, my job is value of employment, not quantity of employment, right? Now, if sufficient number of entities are created, then employment happens. But my job is the value. I want Indian to be expensive. I mean, that's the rule. That's the objective, right? Today we have a factory in Italy. On the shop floor, we pay 35 lakhs. Now, the technology for that factory is going from our factory in Coimbatore, right? And they are profitable. So when I look at that and say, what's wrong here, right? What's wrong with this picture? The picture that is wrong is when somebody is cheap, we use too many of them if something is cheap. And that's really the problem. Now, people say, oh, but you can't compare 35 lakhs in Europe, and they say purchasing power parity. I think this whole purchasing power parity theorem has been created by developmental economists to keep the developing economies developing, right? Now, they talk about, oh, but 1 kilo of rice in India is cheaper than 1 kilo of rice in Italy. And therefore, you have to look at that difference while moderating the salary. But my answer to that is, the quality of that 1 kilo of rice in Italy is far higher than that 1 kilo here. How are you moderating for that? You're assuming that, oh, but that's purchasing power parity. That's not fair. Why can't the Indian have the same quality of, they talk about four-wheeler. They have a car. And then they will say, here, it'll be a hatchback. There, it'll be an SUV. Why? Why is it that we can't have the same quality of car? So somewhere that theorem has got its defects. So I say, forget the theorem. In absolute terms, we have to get there. How do we get there, right? And I think it's all about, designing processes, designing norms and technology that will make that happen, right? And we're on that track. We'll get there. Yeah.
So you gave this example of quality of rice.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper here as compared to Italy.
Yeah.
Then why don't we sell it to Italy at the same price?
Exactly. Yeah.
We're not able to sell because it doesn't see value in this offering that we have.
Yeah.
This concept of value proposition also I learned working with when we had a collaboration with Westinghouse in 1990s, and they came up with this 12 companies in USA got together to create a concept of value creation for the customer, and similar to what Dr. Kano is attractive quality creation.
Right.
But to do all that takes a lot of hard work.
Sure.
More than hard work, it also takes the way we look at value. It's not what we give. In India, still quality, most people think meeting specification is a quality. And we are struggling to meet specifications. So what do? We relax the specification in order to meet the specification.
Yeah.
I've seen it happening in so many well-run companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we get out of that? It's not only specification, it's the consistency of the product we offer.
Absolutely.
that the customer is looking for.
Absolutely.
And this is what the Japanese did.
Yeah.
Zero ppm levels. I remember somebody giving me an example from USA, IBM fellow. So they bought some parts from Japan and they asked them to give, acceptable quality level, AQL as they call is, so many defects. So they received the consignment, all the good quality, in a separate packet. So what is a separate packet? It is a defective you produced for yourself because you wanted it like that. Another example I recall is after Ford Motor Company started in 1982 with the help of Dr. Deming to improve their quality, because after making $3 billion loss, and they made a very successful car called Ford Taurus, very successful.
Yeah.
And they started getting it made because they didn't have enough capacity by Mazda, who was where they had a joint venture ownership there. And in USA, people found that they would prefer a Japanese-made car, Mazda-made car, than the Ford-made car in Europe, because the warranty costs were much lower.
Yeah.
So it's just he's worked on how do I reduce the variation
Absolutely.
within the component rather than meet within the specification.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So my sense of this transition is not yet happening. We accept lower quality products. So how do we bring about this cultural transformation to start thinking differently as you have started thinking?
I think it's a very interesting question. We tend to look at just enough is good enough, right? But I think we don't go and say, what is that level of precision which will, delight the customer by being very diffusive, in the sense that, you make the best product. It has, if the customer thinks about it the least, it means it's the best, right? The more you make the customer think about your product, it means that you've made something wrong, because it's constantly giving them some sort of a hassle or not, and it's coming to their mind. Now, the whole idea of quality is, there is a specification, and unfortunately we always put a lower limit and an upper limit, which gives us a lot of, this freedom to violate, right? Now, how do you get a mind to think about, forget about that upper and lower, right? Try and get to exactly where it's supposed to be. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, we are talking about CPKs and, values where you're saying get to the mean, don't look at the upper and lower level. Very hard transformation, right? I think driving for that, setting your machinery to that standard, your process to that standard, your review mechanisms to that standard. I don't think there is one thing that will give you that switch, Janak. I think it's a whole environment that consists of multiple things, and the consistency of demanding it over a period of time. Then slowly the needle starts shifting, right? But it takes time. I don't think it will happen overnight. But it will happen. There is no doubt it will happen.
The quality of Indian products have improved considerably over the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Only challenge is others improving faster than we are. The gap is still continuing to increase between what we offer in terms of the value proposition to the customer and what the competing countries and companies are offering. You gave a good example, know how and know why.
Yeah.
It is the same companies from whom the Japanese and the Korean, the Chinese
Absolutely.
got technology.
Absolutely.
but they worked hard to find their own way to improve it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it was part of the reason is the legacy of controlled economy,
Yeah.
that we could sell whatever we produced.
Yes.
So, and then L1 became important to make money.
Yes.
So sell what you produce and buy the lowest you can get.
Yeah.
In the context, the quality lost its relevance.
Sure. Sure.
At one time in India, people were very proud of. I remember when I was young, people were disciplined. Nobody violated the discipline.
Yeah.
And people are proud of making good quality products.
Yeah.
But we have come this far, but now swinging the pendulum back is happening not fast enough. As typically the saying goes, we'll probably become old before we become rich. The conundrum.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there has been a remarkable shift in the quality standards. But is it good enough? No. Some of the nations that we are competing with are moving at a far higher pace. And I think that's the benchmark that we need to look at. Yes, we need to pause and celebrate our own progress, but we should not bask in that glory because the sun is shining far higher on others who we are competing with. And I think we need to get there. So one is the quality of what we make, and the other is the reimagination of the value that we can provide to customers, right? You know, I keep saying the stated need and the unstated want. You know, the stated need is what you're producing today. You got to be the best in that, right? If you're not, then you've lost the right to play, right? But just because you are making the stated need of the customer in the best possible way, you don't have the right to win. Yeah, you have the right to play, but not the right to win. For a European, American, Japanese company, that is good enough for them to win. But for an Indian company, you not only should have that, be the best in the stated need, but discover the unstated want, right? And that's your disruptive right to win. Yeah. So there are hundreds of examples of that, right? You look at BlackBerry, right? 10, 15 years ago, that was the status product. You know, everybody had a BlackBerry. You go to a customer of BlackBerry and say, what do you want? Yeah. You know, people like me with fat fingers, you know, your buttons were so small, you ended up pressing too many buttons at the same time. So you said, want bigger buttons. Customer will never say, I want the touch screen. You know, so discovering that unstated want is really where you disrupt and shift the market. And I think that's what we need to do in India, because then you've got a clean sheet of paper, right? Rather than trying to compete with everyone else who's just delivering the stated need, right? We have something very close to home that was done. You know, there was a company in Chennai called Velvet. You know, they made shampoo in a sachet, right? Till that time, it was all Hindustan Lever, Procter and Gamble selling shampoo in a bottle, right? 200 ml of shampoo, 300 rupees. That was the stated need of the customer. You go then ask them, oh, I want a pink bottle, I want with this perfume or whatever. But this man recognized that people in the bottom of the pyramid had an aspiration to use shampoo, but they didn't have the cash flow to pay 300 rupees, right? So he brought a 1 rupee shampoo in a sachet, opened up that huge market, and his profitability was 3 times that of a shampoo in a bottle, right? That for me is disruption. Discovering the unstated want. Now, every product, there is an unstated want. Now, if we in India, even while we chase the stated need, can we chase and discover the unstated want and disrupt the market and therefore create a clean sheet for ourselves and a profit sanctuary that nobody else can come in? And I think we need to pursue both, right? We should not just say, oh, we are just starting, so we will stay with the stated need, be the best in it. Yes, you need to, but you need to get this, right? And this will disrupt the market and kind of rocket propel you into the future, rather than go through that gradual thing. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, Jay.
Yeah.
My challenge is even stated needs. There's some compromising to even say that I'm fulfilling stated needs, even when I don't fulfill the stated needs. And within the stated needs, how do I bring consistency that I keep tightening the tolerances?
Absolutely.
And make the experience, because customer experience is a variation.
Absolutely.
He doesn't experience the tolerance.
Yeah. I agree.
So that itself is not yet happening in many companies.
No, absolutely. I'm not saying that this is a compromise for that, Janak. I'm saying you've got to be the best in the stated need, right? Tolerances, standards of quality, repeatability, all that is absolutely table stakes. If you don't have it, you don't even have the right to play. Yeah. But you're not going to win.
True.
Yeah. This will make you win hands down,
See, if everybody else fulfills the stated needs, why would he like to buy from us in India when he doesn't have the confidence in their label?
True.
We have to offer something better value than this.
Sure.
The classical example was, California is known to bring the latest laws on environment, typically. Yeah. And I recall when this happened in late 70s, and the US companies said it's not possible. And they actually campaigned with the president to tell California. And lo and behold, a year later, the Japanese companies met those norms, 20% cheaper, selling it. And then these big three go to the US president. I think Jimmy Carter was the president, saying that, hey, please protect us from that.
Yeah, do something.
But
Yes.
Jimmy Carter said, you guys said it is not possible.
Yeah.
Somebody else has done it. Yeah. So that's where the voluntary restraint came in. We need to do something similar.
Yeah.
And I've been to China a number of times, basically in the context of quality conferences. Yeah. So a couple of companies I visited. One is called ELGi. They make compressors for, air conditioners and refrigerators, second largest in the world. I went to their plant and their chairman took me around. There's nothing different than what they, in terms of the equipment and the people, everything similar to what we have in India.
Absolutely.
But they started developing their own technology. Learning from Hitachi, they developed their own technology. They showed me they had about 4,000 patents.
Wow.
And this is maybe, I think, about 12 years ago.
Wow.
And we can't, he's now got a plant in India, serving 50% India. Why we can't make a compressor for air-conditioned refrigerators?
Absolutely.
And because of that, they become number 2 in the world. And like you mentioned about Hawaii, they were no bigger than Indian companies like Voltas and Godrej and others.
Yeah.
Today it's a $56 billion. Again, what I read through the website in Hawaii was, they said, our focus is the largest market for air conditioners is USA.
Yeah.
Our focus is to deliver there. If I can deliver, all the rest of the markets will come to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But most of us take the plea, let's go to the softest market.
Yeah.
Where we don't have to make too much of an effort.
Yeah.
Then we'll never get to the bigger markets.
Sure.
So this change in thinking is what we need to bring about.
Yeah.
Not easy, but doable.
Yeah.
I think you're taking a lead in that direction. And maybe you can explain, share a little more how you made this transition by offering greater value to the customer, better than the competition, and transited from not even the top 100 to get in amongst the
Sure.
top 10 and now number 6, and aiming to get to amongst the
Yeah.
top 3.
Mhm. Well, when we entered Europe and the US about 12, 13 years ago. And we, obviously, we are unknown, brand-wise unknown, we were at that time. And we had Made in India as our label, right? So we had to present a certain value proposition to the customer, which was disruptive. And through that value proposition, convey a certain standard of the company that was far, far away from price. This was critical. So what did we do? We said we will bring in lifetime warranty in the US, right? Oh, that was disruptive, right? So we said we are so confident about the quality that we produce. We are offering this. No strings set. We used to call it asterisk-free warranty. You see normally in the advertisement, they will say this much warranty and there'll be an asterisk.
That's right.
And right at the bottom, all the disclaimers will be there. We said ours is an asterisk-free warranty, lifetime. We're going to present it. And this is the value. And we do this. If we don't have the quality and the processes to fulfill this, we'll be bankrupt in a second, right? So that's the value that we brought in. That was an audaciously different value proposition that made some noise in the market, got us attention, right? That then slowly the gear started shifting, right? And now, okay, in Europe, we probably have about 5% share of the market and roughly the same, maybe 6% share in the US. So these are significant shift in the needle for an Indian company making capital equipment that goes into a factory, and if it fails, the factory shuts down. To be able to build 5% share of the market is not easy, but then that's how we architected the whole thing. Yeah.
So how much time it took you to get to 5% share of the market?
Took us about 12 years.
Oh, 12 years.
12
Great.
years.
You also mentioned, just now that you wanted to be asterisk-free
Warranty.
quality
Yeah.
and commitment, lifetime warranty. And then obviously you have to make products which will live up to that reputation. So which came first? Did you first define that and then started improving quality, or you improved it to a level that had the confidence to define it?
It was the latter. We, like I said, an Indian product cannot fail. So we said we've got to build a quality which is not good, as good is not good enough. It had to be far, far better. So we went deep into the market, documented the defect levels of all our competitors, right? What is their standard? What is their defect level? And we said, it's not about benchmarking our current defect levels. It's about benchmarking the competitors' defect levels and seeing absolutely exponentially higher than them, right? So then we worked backwards and in our processes and said, okay, what is design related? What is process related? What is supplier related? What is our own internal sales related? Put it all together and we said, let's move the needle. It's only when we got there, this was a strategic part of that journey towards getting into those markets, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So I think you answered my question.
Yeah.
That intent was there
absolutely,
to get to that, and this is a strategy to get there.
absolutely,
Great.
yeah, absolutely.
I think this is a remarkable achievement.
So we don't try to sell on price. In fact, if you look at our list price, is almost the same as all the competitors in the market. We're not lower. We're not lower at all. No.
Remarkable. Jay, one aspect is how did you bring about a change in culture within your organization from what it was to what it is today in terms of quality improvement, development of new products, disruptive products, value added products, which you just explained? That'll be good for us to learn.
So let me step back a little bit, Janak, from the quality and technology and all. I will talk a little bit about the people who made that transformation. So I still remember when I joined the business, it was the time of the year when we were doing a wage negotiation. For me, that was it was an eye opener. Right? So it was sitting across the table. The management was willing to give 500, but they made an offer of 200. On the other side, labor was willing to accept 600, but they made a demand of 1,000. So it was almost like a fish market negotiation. For me, this fundamental problem is trust. There is no trust. Now, when you don't have trust, you can't build an organization where people believe that there is a collective larger good that we need to pursue, right? Whether it's quality, whether it's technology, whether it is anything, right? So the trust had to be built. So we said next wage negotiation is not going to be a negotiation. It's going to be a collective convergence. And we said we need to build a model for that, right? So we built a model which said the company is responsible for shop floor employee standard of living. Now, that assurance, if you give, there is a huge amount of fear that is taken out, trust gets built. So we said, how do we do that? So we said, let us co-create definition of standard of living by elements of consumption, right down to the most granular thing like a haircut, the school fees, the uniform, durables, so many kilograms of tomatoes, whatever, everything was documented. And we said, the shop floor employees will go to actual shops in their neighborhood and refix the salary every year. So it was like a transformation. So we said, this is what we will do. And lo and behold, suddenly the trust levels went up. We don't have a union in our factory, right? So every 5 years, we sit with the employees and their families and co-create the new standard, right? Now, the reason I'm narrating this is, by the way, this is in the Harvard Business School library as a case study.
Wow.
Right? Now, this was important to build that foundational trust because people come to work for appreciation of their brain and not their brawn. Yeah. Whereas on the shop floor, we are only looking at people for their brawn, but we are wasting the brain, right? Now, to utilize the brain, there has to be a sense of, I belong here, I need to contribute here, I want to contribute here. So this foundational building of trust where people felt that they belonged to the company, right, was critical, right? Now, once that was done, then it required for us to build that same level of empathy at the white collar level towards the shop floor employees. Because there is, education brings a certain arrogance, and therefore we had to sort of say, no, you are responsible for speaking up for the people with the lowest voice in the company, and therefore you build trust, right? And therefore you build participation. So in our journey, whether it's our quality journey finally towards Deming, our technology journey where we are now delivering disruptive products for the first time in the world, the underlying thing was trust and a sense of fairness and equity in the thing. That was, if you ask me, can you give me an A plus B is equal to C kind of an equation for that value? I cannot. But I can tell you anecdotally so many instances where people participated way beyond the call of duty, right, in the larger good for the company. I think so that was a key foundational thing in our transformation. The second was, we said, process delivers performance. People don't. Yeah. You can have the best person in the world, the most knowledgeable person in the world. Organizations deliver quality horizontally, not vertically, right? Organizations tend to manage companies vertically, but quality is delivered horizontally. And horizontal management is about process, right? And ownership to the process rather than ownership to your function, right? That switch where we brought in the collective responsibility to the end goal, right? It is not about whether it is, I'm in product development, I'm in procurement, I'm in, supplier quality. No. It is a process that finally you deliver to the customer, and that horizontal management was very key. Yeah. We had to bring that transformation of saying, how do you bring horizontal management as a means in the company, right? You had to build that muscle. The general tendency is vertical management. So I think that was a key foundation in our journey. Yeah.
So then, white collar, you did that, and I think it's a great example of a cross-functional management to deliver the outcomes.
Yeah.
Now, how do you, like you correctly said, the education brings a degree of arrogance, and in most companies, you find the design and development group of people who are probably the most educated.
Yeah.
A little more difficult to get them involved in this kind of. How did you manage to get them involved in this whole process? Because without them, making disruptive technologies may not be that easy.
I think it's about getting people to imagine the invisible. There is a product, visible, improve it is one level of challenge. But there is a product, but visualize something that doesn't exist. And getting people to get excited about that. Just that visceral description of that imagination, right? And say that's really what the customer's unstated want is. How can we take it there, right? Let's go out and make mistakes. It's okay, right? Let's fail. That's okay, right? But let's go do something. Just get that excitement up. Yeah. I think the company's willingness to let people fail is very important, right? Embracing failures, celebrating failures, not penalizing people. The minute you penalize people on failure, then whole initiative, entrepreneurship, innovation dies, right? So I think it's important to say, go and do something, doesn't matter. Let's fail. It's okay. But let's do something. I think that was for a lot of the engineering minded people, it's that freedom to experiment that gives them a lot of energy, right? And you let them do it and support them when they fail, give them that safety net. I think the next round becomes a success, right? So I think but Janak, it's not a straight arrow. It's, you just keep doing it, you learn and you keep improving. There is no one formula that will just work. Yeah.
You also talked about the brawn and the brain.
Yeah.
The brawn, of course, typically we think workmen, people at the first lower rung of the hierarchy, cannot think on their own. They cannot add value in terms of they come here to do what they are told to do.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I sense the Japanese changed, got them involved in development of the system for which they are responsible. The ownership went there.
Yeah.
And they will still think they are here as physical bodies and I can get the most once they are present. But if we don't involve them in their thinking process to contribute to the improvement, that's where the suggestion scheme, Q circle approach came with that intent in mind. Get them involved in terms of using their brain power. How do we get their heart involved in terms of involvement? Motivation.
I think the difference between a blue collar and a white collar is a white collar employee has options in the job market. A blue collar employee at the level of compensation that we pay has almost zero options. Now, you got to understand the mind of that kind of a blue collar employee. They are kind of, in a way, in their mind, slaves to the job, right? Now, the more you make it look like that, the more it gets entrenched, right? So the idea would be to say, no, you're not a slave to this job. There is no job in the company that is not inaccessible to you. You remove that glass ceiling, right? So what happens is you're coming into the job with a certain level of hope, because a blue collar employee typically works without hope because they're going to be blue collar for the rest of their lives. That's what is in their mind. But if you remove that glass ceiling and say, tell me, these are all your options for getting trained, getting upskilled, and you move up, right? It changes the whole equation, right? So you're no longer a slave to a particular job. You have mobility, right? I think that's very important. And the minute that happens, there is a certain hope that you bring into the mind of the blue collar employee. That creates a huge commitment. That is one part. The second part is the job has to be architected where you demand that participation. It demands that participation. So, for instance, in our company, we don't have supervisors. So, the entire shop floor is self-managed teams. There are teams of people by rotation play the scheduling role, the quality role, the material feed role. They rotate and do that role themselves. So what happens is there is accountability to delivering that value in that job, right? So it's not just about desiring them a category of employees to step up, but architecting the job in such a way that there is a responsibility, right? So you provide that responsibility, right? So it's a combination of these two.
I think from what you stated just now, the whole concept of QC circles,
Yes,
training people to work as a team,
correct.
developing their own system and improving those systems.
Right.
And you, in the process, show them how to use a PDCA approach of
Right.
QC story.
Yes,
Actually, same PDCA is taught in business schools.
yes.
So in a way, you made them as think like
Absolutely.
managers
Sure.
and give them the responsibility.
Sure.
So another aspect is how do we get the middle and the senior level people motivated? Because there's also a degree of motivation that is required
Yeah.
because they're going to lead these people ultimately.
Yeah. So the middle management in the company is what I call as on one side, the silent sufferers, and on the other side, the biggest inertia in the company, right? So if that middle is not robust and agile and enthusiastic, we have a problem, because they are the ones who take the message at the top and without diluting, take it to the bottom. And they are the ones who take the message at the bottom and convert it into working solutions that makes everyone. So they are a very critical, and that's a huge challenge. That's a huge, huge challenge. I don't think we have a perfect solution yet. We're doing multiple things to keep rotations, to make sure that there is no monotony. New person comes in, innovates, brings different perspectives and points of view. But there is no clear answer yet. But that is in my opinion, the biggest challenge. I don't think it is just for Indian companies, and I think it is the same all over the world. It's that silent sufferers in the middle who take the brunt from the top, they take the brunt from the bottom, and they're kind of turbulent in the middle. Yeah.
So it's equally then at the senior level, especially in the functions like marketing, design and development, technology development, is a degree of arrogance because they're the most knowledgeable in the company.
Absolutely.
I often think they're so good they can never make a mistake.
Yeah.
So how did you bring about a change in their way of thinking, looking for something more aspirational than what they did in the past?
I think the first challenge for us in terms of changing the mindset at the leadership level is to make people believe it's possible. First of, because you set it in the context of India, you're quite happy to say, I will be very good in India. But here we were saying we want to be the best in the world, right? It was a bit of an alien concept. You say, okay, fine. That's what you want, that's fine. The convergence is always India, yeah? But to break that and say, no, the convergence is not India. India is one of the many markets, right? Your centricity should be global, not India, right? It takes a long time to bring that change. I think the most critical is to walking the talk, where you're saying we want to go, for instance, what I was talking about earlier about the lifetime warranty, right? You put something like that on the ground and say, this is what we're going to offer, yeah? And everybody sort of wakes up and says, seriously? You're going to do this in America? Yes, but we've done it for the last 10, 12 years. We've built a quality. So now is the time to prove that it is good, right? So the minute you do that, then there is again, the wheels start changing slowly. And over a period of time, they say, wow, we have lifetime warranty. It's been 10 years. Our failure rates are one of the lowest, and our warranty costs are one of the lowest in the industry. We're doing something right? So that pride and that self-confidence starts coming up. Yeah. Then the confidence with which they go and explore other audacious goals just increases, right? So it's a journey, Janak. It cannot happen with just one switch. Yeah.
See, you're fortunate in running a business of your own, so you have a long-term
Sure.
time available for you to do that.
Sure.
In most of the organization, the CEO is for 5 years, 6 years. Find it very difficult to
Absolutely.
look at a long-term perspective. What do you think the role of the vision you defined played in this whole journey?
So the starting point post-liberalization, the writing was clearly on the wall, right? So it was not a personal desire, but a absolute compulsion. But it's very difficult to get people to see what is not visible, right? So I could see the writing on the wall, but it was not visible to the others. So convincing them was the hardest task, right? But sometimes, you try the convincing route, but also you put the compulsion, say, sorry, this is what we're going to do, right? So that vision, so that was one part. And the other part of it was the vision had to have credibility, right? You can't just say, I want to be a global player. Say, why? What's the logic, right? So we had to go in and say, this is the size of the global market. This is the size of the Indian market. Where do you really want to play? As a businessman, would you go and play in a small market or would you play in a large market, right? So we had to build the data and credibility to the whole thing. And the second part is it's not just top line. Look at the bottom line of all the large global players. They are double the profitability of what we are, right? So bigger market, higher profit is outside in the world. I said that's where we should be, right? So building that credibility with data, and that was critical, right?
So I see, you have one of your on the website about build a world-class and world-scale company out of India, which would be country agnostic in its competitive advantage. So when and how did you create this vision?
So right from the beginning, uh, I felt that we were not getting the respect in the world as Indians. Even when I was doing my PhD, there were Indians, but there were Japanese and the Koreans, and they got more respect than we did, right? And I knew that the only way you get respect is when you have economic superiority, right? And economic superiority comes not from one or two people being rich. It's about the whole country being rich, right? All. So while you're building a globally competitive company that has got that economic superiority, it had to be that everybody is at a certain level of equity, which meant that we had to pay more and still be competitive. So I said, that means we can't be relying on India, right? And India, cheap labor in India, as a means to be competitive, right? Either we build a capability where we can set up a factory in Europe or America and still be, or you learn in India, make Indians expensive, and still be competitive. That way you can set up the factory anywhere in the world, right? So that's really where the journey started, right from the beginning. Yeah.
great. And then you'll be able to get the buy-in from the people. I think such audacious goals also encourages and motivate people to work in that direction. So setting such a vision is a very important element. Like I remember Mr. Devarsya set a vision, Mahindra tractor would be number one in terms of volume. You define. Well, that motivated the whole company.
Sure.
We want to be number one in the world.
Absolutely.
Then you also define certain values system. What were the factors which contribute to development of those value system, and how do we ensure, how important is those values that you define for the organization?
So for us, purpose of the organization trumps profit. Now, what I mean by purpose is our purpose has got nothing to do with our business. A lot of companies' purpose is about making products that makes life better. It's still linked to the business. Our purpose is about people, right? We have 6 stakeholders who are all people who touch the company. Our customers, our employees, our suppliers, our distributors, our investors, and our society. They all touch the company. And when they do, their experience should be as though we are on the other side. We are also customers. We are also employees. We are also suppliers. We are also distributors. We are also investors, and we are part of the society. But somewhere, there is a hypocrisy. When we are customers, our standards are very high. When we are suppliers, we tend to lower it, right? So our purpose is called conscience in action. Conscience in action. It basically means put yourself on the other side and behave. It's like the golden rule of spirituality. Be and do to others what you would like others to be and do to you. Right. That's the essence of our purpose, right? And we believe that if you do that, right, profit will come. Yeah. But don't do it for the sake of profit. Do it because that's the right thing to do. And for us, that is very, very important, right? So when COVID hit, we took a call. Nobody is going to lose a job. Nobody's salary is going to be cut. Now, that was an audacious decision. We announced it to the whole company. Now, how did we live it? We didn't know April 2020 how long COVID is going to be. Some people said it'll be like a Spanish flu, 3 years. So we said, okay, let us try and build cash in the company. So as promoters, we were actually willing to go and dilute our stake to bring cash in for at least 1.5 years of people cost, right? We came to the final stage of signing the agreement. Fortunately, COVID went off, business started growing. We would have done it, and I think it is critical that we do, right? There are certain things that that are more important than profit. And we believe if we pursue that, profit will come. So these are to talk about the culture and the values. These are very important for us. So
I think what you said is so true. In Indian philosophy, purpose is supreme. Why we exist as an organization.
Right.
Not for our own sake, but for a larger cause, which we call as the yagna spirit.
Yeah.
And I find the Japanese companies, when I went in 1982, had something similar, much wider purpose. In the Western world, I never see purpose statement. I only see a vision statement or a mission statement interchangeable. But I think the rationale for being in existence is very important. And if that is for larger good, that is a great motivator for people in the organization. Absolutely. They recognize I'm not working for the sake of making profit for the shareholders, but I'm working for a larger cause.
Absolutely.
And as in Indian philosophy, we say, if purpose is sublime, the release of energy from within an individualist,
Absolutely.
outstanding.
Absolutely. I agree.
And that's what motivates people
Absolutely.
to. So when I came back from Japan in 1982, one of the first things symbolic we started was I was a general manager responsible for manufacturing, technology, etc., reporting to the managing director. I couldn't change the policies. So let's collectively start working. And simple things like, a morning prayer.
Yes.
So we used to sing Vande Matram,
Mm-hmm.
and then one sentence that we work for the benefit of the nation.
Yeah.
Nation first, and then the company, and then department, and then us.
Yeah.
So just a couple of these things and some exercises got people to join in the process of improvement, which otherwise they were reluctant to do it. And then we could do anything which otherwise was not possible. And what you mentioned earlier also very important. How do we learn from the mistakes we make?
Yeah.
And how do we, I think about 2 years ago when we were forming Indian Foundation for Quality Management, I was requested to arrange a trip to Japan.
Yeah.
So Mr. Chandrasekhar, Tata Group chairman, we went to Japan, three of us. And obviously the first company to learn is from Toyota.
Absolutely.
So I was under pressure to set up a meeting with the Toyota board members, and so Tata Group chairman is going. And Toyota saying, what do you learn from the board members? They didn't. I said, we will set up something for you. And they did. So they had a quality learning center. What they've done is after, 2007, 8, when they had this unintended acceleration of the vehicle, they set up a quality learning center. What they've done is recorded history of all the failures, major failures in the field. And it's all in Japanese. They translated into English and created a special session for us to go through. First, there was a little reluctance. Why do we have to learn about failures? But then when we went through it, Mr. Chandrasekhar is probably the best part of the visit. Learning from failures, and they made it mandatory that every employee of Toyota in Japan has to visit that center once in a year to reinforce the thinking, this is what we did and this is what we need to learn. I think it was, in a way, doing a replication, something like that. How do we encourage people not to be afraid of failure and learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think teaching failure is more important than teaching success, because success is the ultimate reflection of all the failures, right? Now, if you don't teach failures, how do you get success? So when I was going through the business school, the case studies are all about success. But, when you come back to real world, you get to a success through a series of failures, right? And how do you manage those failures is really the thing about success, And unfortunately, we don't teach. So I think I've heard about the Toyota, that, the failure center or the quality center. I think that's foundational in all teaching. They have to be focused on failures, right? So
we don't learn to walk without falling.
Exactly.
But that lesson we forget as we grow older and smarter.
Right.
Conditioned by the environment. Okay, coming toward then, one more question is related to how do you build capability of people while doing all this? You talked about motivation and various other things.
That's a big challenge, Janak. Of course, we recruit people, the right people. But, right now, the biggest problem is the restlessness in the youngsters. They want to get quickly to a higher place, But to build an organization, you need tenure, right? So our biggest challenge is how do you retain people for long periods of time so that you're able to inject the competencies, the training. So the challenge is not the training. The challenge is to hold them long enough to be able to provide that exposure. It's an ongoing challenge. I don't think we have solved for it. We are very selective in profiling how we recruit. We look for people who exhibit stability, humility, um, and willingness to take a longer term view. But we are not always successful in identifying that. But that at least we say this is what the characteristics we want. Not because we want slaves, but we want people who will stay long enough to absorb what they need to learn. Yeah. So it's a challenge.
See, capability building for a world class. Often think of an example like, I want to be a world class tennis player. It takes years of effort to be there.
Yeah.
But here, what you just stated and what I see happening in industry is more and more industries relying more and more on, contract labor, which by design has to go in.
Yeah.
How do you build capability and you have this kind of a...
No, you cannot.
And this is the trend in most of the industries today.
Fortunately for us, Janak, on the shop floor, our attrition is zero. And we do not have contract labor on our shop floor. We have only contract for housekeeping, canteen, and material movement. But in the production, no, right? We have only our own people, and they go through 3 years of vocational training, right? So we believe that skill is important, but that's easy to do on the shop floor. But when it comes to the office and the white collar, it becomes a bit of a challenge, right? So that's really a problem.
So what do we do in India today? Most companies are moving towards more and more short-term contract labor at the blue collar, 20, 30, 40, some companies 90% of that nature. How do we make world-class products?
It's impossible. If you have not invested in the skills and competencies of people who are actually producing products, we are then trivializing the importance of that activity, right? We are saying it's okay, just make drawings, get parts. The assembly is irrelevant. I believe the last mile of quality is the human being. No drawing, no process is going to ensure that last. The person's feel when that nut doesn't rotate smoothly is a indicator. And if that person's mind and heart are not committed to it, no process and no document is going to save it, right? So I think the last mile is the human being, and we need to invest in the human being. You cannot get temporary people who produce quality. It's not possible.
What you just said is central to the Indian philosophy,
Yeah.
core of the philosophy.
Yeah.
And I find more, how do you get the mind and the heart of a person who's going to be there for 1 year?
Yeah. Impossible. Not possible. Yeah.
So that's, I think, a biggest challenge in India. And anyways, we can't find a solution to that.
Yeah.
So I think one last question.
Sure.
What would be your advice to the young entrepreneurs who come into business, and also the professionals who come into a professional life, as to what should they really look for and do to bring about a change in our country?
One thing that I believe very strongly, and I would like to give that as my advice, is do not make a Me Too product, because a Me Too product gets sold on price. And when you sell something on price, you are reducing your own self-worth, right? So take a product and disrupt it. That's one. Second is, don't follow rules while running an organization. Let the customer drive the rules, right? Then what you're basically saying is, I don't care what we do internally. The result has to deliver value to the customer, right? The third is build your stakeholders. Don't just build your profit, build your stakeholders. One thing is we keep saying we trust our employees, but then we ask them to clock. It doesn't make sense, right? So in our company, nobody clocks, right?
Okay.
So it's small things like that, where you build stakeholder value, which will then flow into profit, right? So I would say these are the three things I would say. Advice.
Great. Thank you very much,
Such a
Jay, for
pleasure.
your time and effort. Beautifully explained. I hope many more people listening to this podcast will take some lessons and work in that direction.
Thank you very
And
much.
like you're making this company as a world-class company, world-class stage,
Thank you.
let's hope many more such products come out of
I'm
it.
sure they will. I have immense faith in India and Indians, and I hope that I'm around to see that transformation, right? And thank you, Janak, for your commitment to this cause for so many years. I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.